Hey, assalamu alaikum everybody. Okay, so I'm back. I told you guys I was going to do this series with you and I got a little bit busy, but alhamdulillah, we're ready to kick it back off. So the next question that I was asked to answer was, what is it like to be a Muslim woman in America? And I think that this question is kind of a cool one, because it also like brings up some other stuff, so I was born in the US, but when I was 7 years old, my family moved to China, and then I spent most of my childhood in China, and then when I was 16, almost 17, I moved back to the US. And when we lived in the US, the state that I was born in is actually it's Georgia, and we were only there, my dad was in the military at the time, so we were only in Georgia for like, I want to say 2 months after I was born. So because of that, whenever anybody has ever asked me where it is that I'm from, I don't want to be like, well, I was born here and then we moved here and then we moved there and whatever. So I always just say I came from my mom because it's easier to explain, and it's also true, right? Like I did come from my mom. But it also like brings up like this really like, like culturally weird thing, because it's like, I'm not Chinese. I was raised in China. I don't always feel 100,000% American either. But with that being said, I am American, and I am an American Muslim who's also a woman. So if any of those things are surprising to you, what are you doing here? But anyways, so what is it like to be an American Muslim woman? So I think it's really interesting because you get to see kind of sometimes just like the hypocrisy, I guess, in the way that like certain ideals are kind of portrayed, right? Because like in the countries that I've been to, there's a lot of times this narrative of like, oh, America is so free and it's so progressive and it's thinking and it's so this, and it's like, yeah, in a lot of ways, especially comparatively to other countries, America is a very like quote unquote free society. But it doesn't mean that you don't get backlash for being different or choosing a different lifestyle or choosing like a way that goes kind of against like the norm. So it's funny because one of the first times I ever wore hijab, I was like testing it out, and I was in a bookstore in I think California, I don't remember. Anyways, I was in a bookstore and this man came up to me and he was like, this is America, right? You don't have to wear that here. And I was like, yeah, like I'm aware, like I'm an American, like I'm very so aware that I don't have to wear that. And it was funny too, because in his head, he obviously thought that I had been forced to wear hijab, when in actuality, I had to like argue with my family, and I still have to have conversations with my family over my choice to wear hijab. So like that in and of itself, it's like, well, it's a free society, but then if you sometimes exercise that freedom, people will act like that's where the freedom should stop, right? Like even if you've been following the news recently, they just shout out to CARE, but they just overturned, there was a ruling in the US where Muslims could get on a no-fly list, and the reason behind it was like, okay, we don't want to have like, terrorists and whatever flying, which that's fair, right? That part is understandable. But what would happen is there would never be any trial. There would never be any formal conviction. You would just kind of get on this no-fly list and then never be able to fly again and never really get a chance to get off it. So alhamdulillah, that got taken to the Supreme Court and they found it unconstitutional. But again, in a society where we're quote unquote so free, people would just have the freedom to fly and to travel stripped away from them without any chance to defend themselves, without any, and you could get on the no-fly list too for as ridiculous of a reason as just being like an outspoken Muslim. So that's like interesting to see, because you do see kind of this hypocrisy, and like, well, they'll be like, well, you have so many freedoms to do these different things, which is true. Again, comparatively to a lot of countries, there's a lot more like freedoms here. But then again, when you start to exercise that freedom, then it's viewed as like, strange and regressive. Like when I started wearing hijab and dressing more modestly, again, I got all this pushback where they're like, this is a free society. And I'm like, okay, I'm exercising that freedom. And they're like, no, we didn't mean like exercise it that way. Like, it's not how we wanted you to go about exercising your freedom. So that part's really interesting. And I also think too, one of the things too is when I was first learning about Islam, and when I first realized like, okay, that I'm going to take Shahada, I'm going to become Muslim and stuff like that. At that time, like the people who were teaching me the most about Islam were all Arab. And so, and I just thought, so like, I associated Islam with Arabs, and like, I just, you know, thought that that was like the crossover or whatever. And then as I made more Muslim friends and I went to more halakas and I talked to more people, then they would be like, no, 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 like, you know, it's not about being Arab, it's about being Muslim. And that thing they told you is not necessarily wrong, but it's based on culture. And then I would get around Desi people, or, you know, all of these other, like, or Spanish Muslims, and they would tell me this, and it was like this huge confusing thing, because I finally realized, I was like, wait a minute, if Muslims are all over the world, if there are Chinese Muslims and Mexican Muslims and you know, Arab Muslims and Pakistani Muslims, how do I figure out what is the culture, or what is the lifestyle we're supposed to be imitating? And I went to go talk to an imam here in Dallas about, because I was thinking about changing my name, because one of the things that a lot of people told me was, they're like, oh, well, you know, if you're a revert, you have to have a Muslim name. You know, there's no Emily in the Quran. You can't be Muslim and Emily. So I went to talk to this imam, and he told me, he was like, that's not true. If your name has a meaning that's like associated with something that's haram, then yes, in that case, you would need to change it. But if your name isn't, then people need to know that you can be an Emily and become a Muslim. You can be a David and become a Muslim, which, you know, like, or like a Jack and a Muslim, or whatever your name is, you can do that. And part of the reason was, it was like, it's not just the name, right? It's who you are as well. And I, for dinner last night, I met with like this couple that has been like they've just been like a life force for me, and they have taken so seriously like the fact that they're supposed to be my brothers and sisters in Islam. Like, they have watched out for me and loved me and prayed for me and really just like treated me like a little sister or whatever. And wait, where is it going with this? Why does this always happen to me? Why do I always, like, I need to have notes, but then it would just confuse me even more. I went out to with these friends. Culture, names, anyways, hopefully that thought comes back. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, we come to Islam with, oh, I remember what it was now. So I was talking to Marusha, who's one of like just this dear sister of mine. She's like just like, you know how you meet those friends sometimes and your hearts just connect and it's so easy, and whenever you see them again, it's so good to be with them. So anyways, I was with Marusha last night, and we were talking about, she was talking about, and I was talking about, like, you know, my life pre-Islam and post-Islam, and I was like, you know what, yeah, subhanAllah, like, when I look back at my life, where it was then and where it is now, yeah, there are parts of things that have had to be sacrificed. There are things, you know, pretty drastic things that have changed in the way that I view the world, the way that I respond to situations. But when I look at everything, I can see in my character how, if you follow the Quran, right, and the way Marusha explained it, she's like, it's like a polishing, right? It's like whoever and whatever it was that you were, Allah takes it. This happens to me every time. I will never, ever, anyways, this happens every time. I get tricked into wearing chiffon scarves. I always think I can wear them, and then next thing you know, they're like sliding off everywhere. It doesn't matter how many pins I put in. And I'm like, okay, I'm never wearing chiffon again. And then lo and behold, here I am tricked into chiffon again. But she was talking about how Islam is like a polishing. Like, it takes who you were and it makes you more defined and more refined and better. But with that being said, you can become a better American Muslim. You can become a better Chinese Muslim. You can become a better Mexican Muslim. You don't have to lose those fundamental parts of your culture, as long as it isn't in any way, shape, or form against what it is that we know to be like halal and good and right. And I was listening to this book by Tariq Ramadan last night, and one of the things that he was talking about is how the Muslims, when they first became Muslim, they had to deal with that all the time, where they were having to constantly like separate their culture versus what is the culture and what is Islam. And it doesn't mean that they couldn't have their culture or couldn't practice their culture still, because people don't exist in a vacuum, right? You are influenced by the situation that you're in. Even when you look at Islamic history, you have to understand the history that was going on at that that frame of time, to understand what it was that was going on. And that's the same thing with people, right? We're influenced by our culture. It's a fundamental part of who we are. We don't have to give it up. But unless it is in any way standing against like fundamental or any principles of Islam. And so yeah, so being an American Muslim woman is weird. You see a lot of, like I said, hypocrisy. This is kind of funny, but like when we used to, I was like in a bigger city before, and there was a lot of Muslims there. There was a lot of hijabis there, and now where I'm at right now, it's a pretty kind of rural conservative town. I've only ever seen like 2 other hijabis, you know, whatever, and so I felt just like, and it's also an older town too, where like most of the population is older or aging. And I have just felt sometimes, like one time I went to a restaurant with some of my friends, and none of my friends, they're all classmates of mine, none of them are Muslim, and they wound up leaving the restaurant early because of how rudely this one table kept staring at us because of me being there. But it was also funny because last week was Halloween, and 2 different people complimented me on my Halloween costume, and all I was doing was wearing hijab, and I was like, what do you think I'm dressing as? Like a tired Muslim? Why would I dress like that? Like, what costume is that? But yeah, there's or also another example. I know this is just like a funny example. I was on my university campus, and someone asked me if I was a US citizen, and I was like, the only reason why you don't think I'm American, the only reason why that would even come into your head is because I'm wearing a hijab, right? And so we have like this thing where we say, okay, it's like freedom of religion here, and we have a freedom to practice religion. But again, people can't also marry those 2 ideas with each other. And it's funny too, because like we value ourselves as being so progressive, but in my understanding of Islam has been so progressive in ways that are so important for the rights of women, in terms of education, in terms of like all these other things. So that part's funny. I think like also there's that ayah of the Quran that talks about how someone just knocked my door. Okay, that was weird because it is late and nobody's showing up my door. I live in like, yeah. So anyways, this is like college area. So, a lot of times people aren't sleeping here because everybody's like crying over their study material. But, what was I saying? Islam, this ayah of the Quran that talks about how Allah created us in tribes so that we might know each other. And I think it's really important to notice, he didn't say I created you, like he could have just made us one homogenous group where we were all the same and we all thought the same and we all had like the same type of food and the same type of everything, but he didn't. It was very like a very what is the word? It was a very, it was a clear decision and a clear distinction to cause us to be separate, or not to cause us to be separate, but to cause us to be different, so that we could know each other and we could learn from each other. And in my times, like the times that I've been in different countries or traveled at all, you just get to these places sometimes and it's just off the bat automatic, where you can just automatically see sometimes, okay, this is radically different than what it is that I'm used to. And if like, in terms of food, in terms of language, in terms of all of these other things. And Allah gave that to us to add to us as a richness, you know? So I came from my mom, but I'm an American Muslim woman. I'm always going to be an American Muslim woman, inshallah. Those aren't things that are going to be separated. There's never going to be a time where you tell me there's like halal tacos and I won't be excited about it, you know? But the fundamental thing and the things that brings us all together is Islam. You know, and so everything else, any other differences that we bring with us, I think are a gift from Allah, and it's a chance for us all to get to know each other. So yeah, jazakallah khair for watching, and make sure you are subscribed and head over to my page called A Hijabi's Hustle, and you can find more updates about my dorky life. And yeah, we have one more episode coming up in this little 3-part series. So jazakallah khair for watching, and assalamu alaikum. Bye bye.